Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Tracy Terrance from the University of Rochester Department of Family Medicine. I'm also chair of STFM's Minority and Multicultural Collaborative. I would like to welcome you, so excited to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Navigating the Nuances of Taking on More Responsibilities. So the MMHC, we've rated faculty development and academic promotion as a top priority for this academic year, and we are so pleased to collaborate with the leadership through scholarship, fellowship, faculty to bring you this information on finding value in the work that we do and being careful with our yes, particularly in relation to the minority tax. So our presenters today are two members of the LTS faculty, Drs. Kendall Campbell and Dr. Stacy Obaid. Dr. Campbell is a tenured professor and chair of family medicine at the University of Texas Medical Branch, and Dr. Obaid is the director of behavioral health education and associate professor clinical in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at UT Health San Antonio. So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to those of you who have already sent questions in. We will have dedicated time at the end of today's session to answer additional questions. So please, as you are listening today, if you have a question, utilize the Q&A feature and at any point during the webinar, and we will be sure to get to it. So at this point, I will pass it over to Dr. Campbell, and we will begin today's presentation. Thanks again.
Hello, everyone. We are very excited to share with you today about how you think about taking on more responsibilities. And the format for today's session is I will present a few slides first, and then I'll hand it over to Dr. Obaid, and then we'll take the questions. So navigating the nuances of taking on more responsibility. Next slide. So the objectives of this talk, so we want you to be able to understand how to say yes, and we're going to frame that and help you with that. We're going to help you understand in terms of identity when yes means no. We're going to describe, which additional responsibilities will be career building, because that's always important. And then we're going to employ how to make hits for the team or a citizenship yes useful for your career advancement. Next slide. So the first thing I want you all to get out of this is when you're asked to do more things, when people approach you with more responsibilities, it's not always a bad thing. So productive begets productive. So if you've demonstrated in your work role, in your work environment, that you produce, that you have output, that you create, then they're going to come and ask you to do more things. So don't be put off by that. Don't think that's a bad thing. It can be a good thing to be asked to do additional things. The other piece of that is more responsibilities a lot of times will advance the work of the organization. And that's important. It can advance your career. But the key here to think about, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide, is understanding that your plate is only a certain size. So you have to manage those things on your plate. Next slide. So there are what I'm describing as these realities of taking more responsibility. And you got to think about these realities before you sign on to additional things, especially in the setting of minoritized populations, marginalized folks, where minority tax exists, where diversity efforts disparities exist. When you take on more responsibilities, it may impact you in ways beyond what you know. So the first thing is there's only 100% in the whole. There's only 100%. There's only 60 minutes in the hour. So you have to ask yourself, Is there time to do this? Because you can't manufacture time. So is something going to come off of my plate? Is there something that's going to that I'm not going to have to do if I take on this additional responsibility? The other piece to this is you want to ask yourself, can you create a stellar product? So remember, your name is on the line here. When you take on more responsibilities, there is an expectation for you to produce. So can you create a stellar product? If you can't do that, then you may not want to take on that additional responsibility. So will it compromise existing assignments or other things that you already have on your plate? So if you take on this new thing, will it cause the other things that you're already assigned to do to lack luster or to fall by the wayside? And then you have to think about, which is something we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail today, is what are the impacts on your career trajectory and advancement? And this is key because you have to know that you're in a career and you have to know that you're on a trajectory in order to know whether or not these added responsibilities will be impacting those things. And then certainly thinking about what are the impacts or how will these additional responsibilities, how will they impact the department? How will they impact the institution? Next slide. Now that we've kind of framed the fact that when you're being asked to do more, it's not always a bad thing, and how you need to think about the impacts of what more may mean in these different environments, I want to suggest to you 4 different things to think about in terms of how you say yes. So these are 4 things that I suggest you think about before you give a yes as an answer. And we're going to kind of go through these in detail because I think as you think about your yes, understanding these 4 areas, and know that these aren't exhaustive, but these are 4 areas I think are important, will help you figure out how to frame your yes. So first is what I call the time-bound yes. So the time-bound yes, essentially what that means is when you say yes, you're thinking about, am I going to do this for a year? Am I going to do this for 6 months? So you're trying to calendar your yes. And the reason you do that many times is because maybe there's some other things within your professional role that you want to do. Maybe this is something you want to do, but you're not sure if you really want to do it or not. So time bounding your yes a lot of times will give you a way to exit your yes and will also help you bookend the work that you're doing. So the first one is the time bound yes. The next one is the resource linked yes. Well, what does that mean? So that means that if you're asked to do something, if you're asked to take on more responsibilities, you need to think about the resources that are necessary to successfully fulfill that role. So what does that mean? Do you need additional staffing? Will you need a budget? Will you need an additional office? Might you need a conference room? What are the things that you will need to help you be successful with this added responsibility? And that is the resource linked yes. So then following that, I'm calling it the interim yes. So there will be times where you will be invited to do new things, new roles, and you're not quite sure if that's something you want to do long term or if it really falls within your career trajectory. Is it really something that you want to do? So many times you may be able to attach the interim title. So maybe you're interim medical director, or maybe you're interim department head. And what that does is it allows you to get the experience of added responsibility, but still gives you the ability to say, I did this as an interim for X number of months or for this period of time. I don't know for sure that this is the right role for me. And then the last suggestion that I have as you think about how you say yes is the titled yes. And the title yes is important because the titled yes really helps you with regard to your CV. And I put in the bottom here a paper that I would recommend that you all take a look at, which defines kind of how you can accelerate your CV to make you more competitive for advancement. But a title yes means, you look to see, can you add a title to these added responsibilities that have been requested of you? Can you be a director of sorts? Can you be an associate leader of sorts? Can you be a leader? And that title will really kind of structure your work. And that title will be something you can add to your CV in terms of getting ready for advancement or promotion. Next slide. So what happens when your yes means no? And what we're going to talk about here essentially is, and I put it here in red because I wanted to be sure I was clear in our discussion, is the career trajectory mismatch. Now, the key here is understanding that you have to know where you want your career to go to be able to know that there is a mismatch. And I try to use an example here, and one of the examples that I think about is a baking example. So if you're baking a cake, and I think we all like cake, if you're baking a cake and someone offers you some butter or some eggs or some cream or some flour, well, those are things that you can think of, hey, those are things that might be useful for me in baking this cake. But if you're baking a cake and someone wants to gift you a barbecue grill and they want to give you some steak seasoning and some poultry seasoning, then if you're baking a cake, then those other ingredients aren't in line with where you want your career to take you. This is key here. This is key. So when yes means no, what we're saying here is the yes is for a bigger purpose. What do I mean? So the yes is for the department, the yes is for the organization. You're making a bigger yes, understanding that the no is a recognition of limited benefit to your career trajectory. So that you're saying yes to benefit the institution, but that your yes may not be directly beneficial to your career advancement, to your career trajectory, to those things that you're trying to do. And it's key to know that because that helps you frame how you structure that yes. So the yes for the department, and it's important to have yeses for your department. It's important to have yeses for your institution. So they help your department chair. They may help solve problems for your department or for your institution. It demonstrates that you are collaborative and that you are a team player. Those are always good things when it comes to academic roles. But understanding the yes in the context of no is important. So the no again now is recognizing that this yes is going to be of limited benefit to your career. And knowing that means you have to have some understanding of what your career trajectory is and to understand why you're saying no. Now, when you say this yes, as we mentioned before, you should always think about those things that we talked about. Is this a time bound? Yes. Should it be a resource link? Yes. Should it be an interim? Yes. Should it be a title? Yes. Should it include all of those things? Because those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Next slide. So let's talk more about the career trajectory mismatch. And this is important. So this is when added responsibilities don't align with your career trajectory. And how do you figure that out? I mean, how do you begin to unpack that? Well, two things you got to know. So we talked about you having an understanding of where you think your career is going and roughly who it is you want to be in academic medicine. But then you have to get a clear understanding of your institution and the goals of the institution and where the institution sees itself in 5 years. And so understanding the mission, the vision, value statements of the institution will help you determine how your career trajectory aligns with those things. So figuring out who you want to be as an academic family medicine faculty member is going to be foundational to knowing how that identity aligns with that of the institution. I want to make a few more comments about that, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Obai. Next slide for me. So let's talk about alignment. This is, I think about an example here is like alignment in your car. So you go to the tire place and you get new tires for your car, and you buy these tires and they put them on and they balance them and they tell you, well, we need to align them. Well, you want them aligned so that you can go straight down the road and that the tire wear will be even. You want that same thing when it comes to added responsibilities at your institution. So whenever your career trajectory and your professional goals, who you want to be as an academic person, when they align with the direction of the institution, that is the best scenario. That's the best scenario because now you know that what you're doing is not only benefiting you as a faculty member, but it's also benefiting the department, it's benefiting the institution. So that added responsibility may not seem like that big of a deal because you know the gain is global. Well, what about when there's no alignment? These two situations where there can be no alignment. So there can be a situation where there's no alignment with support for your no. Oh, that is key. With support for your no. So what that means is that means that there is departmental or institutional recognition that your career trajectory is going this way, but that the institution may be thinking about some other things, but we recognize that and we want to make sure that your career trajectory is supported, is encouraged. We want to help you move forward, even though it may not be in the bigger picture or the bigger plan of the institution. So that's a better situation. And that's the situation, as we talked about earlier, where your yes means no. No, it's not fitting directly with my career trajectory, but yes, I'm saying yes here because I realize that this is going to be for the better good or for the bigger good, if you will, of the department, of the institution. Now, the concerning piece here is, in terms of no alignment, is that when there's no support for your no, and what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is there is almost this environment where the institution is being paternalistic, if you will, or trying to tell you who they want you to be in these environments. And the added responsibility here is added in the sense of impacting the organization with little regard to who it is that you want to be as a faculty member. And those environments are concerning, and those are environments are ones in which you really need to evaluate whether or not you're in the right place, whether or not your goals are aligning with the institution. How do you need to figure out, how do I forge a path forward in that kind of environment? And with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Obai.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell. So our third objective for today is the question, which additional responsibilities will be career building for you? Dr. Campbell kind of set the stage for you all about how to begin to make those decisions, to ask yourself this question, but I'll dig more into that right now. So next slide, please. So what I have on the screen are some questions to ask yourself to really build upon what's been said so far. Does this ask have a clear path to advancement for you? When I say advancement, that could be promotion. It could be, for those of you interested in the tenure process, does it help get you there? Does it help with a particular leadership position that you're hoping to have in the next few years? Is there a clear path for advancement? Will this committee service support your career growth? One of the things that unfortunately can happen to early career faculty, particularly early career faculty who are also underrepresented in medicine, is the overabundance of committee work that you are brought in to do or asked to sit on this committee. But where is the career growth? How does it support your career? Is this even something that will lay the groundwork for you. Dr. Campbell and myself and some other colleagues published an article last year called the committee tax. It's built off of the minority tax that happens with URM faculty in academic medicine, but we took that from a lens of the overabundance and pressure of committees that really have no connection to your career growth, and how that can be a detriment, unfortunately, to your career. So if you're being brought into a committee, why are you being brought in? It was their career growth for you. The third question here, will it provide information or ideas to support scholarship? Your writing. Part of being a faculty member is giving back to the population at large to improve science, to improve healthcare, to improve teaching, whatever it is that you are passionate about. And so will this ask give to that? Will it give you more information? Will give you more ideas about what to write about, what to do research on, what you could potentially apply for a grant to give legs to something that you are passionate about. So I have some examples there in terms of, it could be an institutional committee, it could be a department committee, but it also could be a national committee. It could be a specialty specific committee as well. And so these are things to think about before you jump to the yes, to ask yourself if any of these things will lead to where you're hoping to go. So next slide, please. So I have some specific strategies to help you as you begin to ask yourself those questions as you're going through the pieces that Dr. Campbell mentioned a moment ago. And so one of the activities is something called an impact map. And so what this does is it helps you at least put things on paper. Sometimes seeing it on paper can really help you clean up the nebulous things going through your mind of, should I do it? Should I not? Will this help? I don't know. Writing it down is a step to giving you clarity on if this is career building for you or not. So an impact map, what it does, it goes through your record of innovation, things that you are hoping to do, wanting to do, currently doing, from idea to hopefully practice change, institutional change, curriculum change, all the above. This also can help you categorize that activity that you're wondering, how will this help me? For many of you, when you're going up for a promotion, your institutions have ways that you can categorize your scholarship role or strength. Some people call it teaching education. Some people have a research strength. Some people have a service strength. Some institutions carve out clinical from service and you have a clinical arm, however your institution does it. Number one, make sure you're familiar with what are the scholarship strengths my institution categorizes for me. And then figure out, how will this committee help me with my promotion in the area of education or service or research or community engagement, whatever that might be. How will this committee do X, Y, Z for my career? So an impact map can help you with that. On the screen, there's a snapshot of an impact map. If you get these slides later, take a look at that in more detail, but it just kind of maps out with a timeline to help you categorize that better for yourself. Next slide, please. The other idea or something to consider doing is something called the ABC framework. I really like this. This fits, I think, pretty well with what Dr. Campbell was mentioning earlier about how to categorize these activities for yourself, and if it is career building for you. So the A stands for what you gravitate to. This is, if you see on the screen, what you love to do, what gets you up in the morning, what gets you up in the morning, especially if you're tired, you're like, I don't know if I want to get out of bed today, but the A is what really gets you out of bed and says, oh, this is the part of my work that I flourish in, that I absolutely love and I'm passionate about. Then you have your B. So this is what you like to do. And so this could be things that you're okay with, maybe you're not as excited about, because that would go into the A category, but you enjoy it. You enjoy the things in the B category. And then there's the C. These are the roles and tasks in order to get paid, to get a paycheck. So there might be the what you have to do. There might be things that you're already thinking of. Okay, yeah, I definitely know what I could put into that bucket for sure. So what is encouraged with this model is how can you maximize the A's and hopefully minimize the C's. Our B's are good. Especially in school, you may have thought of, I need to get straight A's. That's the goal. In the work world, that is not necessary. It may not be realistic to have everything in your job be an A, and that's okay. It's called adulting. It doesn't always happen that way. But how can you at least have a good amount of things fall into the A category? But also, how can we minimize the C's? The C's sometimes can be the ones that kind of pull your energy and be the heavy things that maybe you're not as excited about, but you're like, this is part of why I was here in my institution to do these things. And so again, it's thinking about, as you're making decisions, does it fall into one of these things, these categories? And how can you maximize your A's, make sure you have a healthy B, and then how can we have enough in there for the C for you to get a check each month, but also where your C doesn't end up being 50% or 60% or something like that. Next slide, please. This last idea here is something called a scholar map. And so it's another career development tool that you could use to map out things that you're doing. Go back to your CV and kind of look at, okay, what have I been doing? How could I categorize that based on scholarship strengths? Maybe there's an area that you notice, I really need to work on my writing, my scholarly writing. There's a big gap in my CV for that. So when you're saying yes to something, how does it fill a gap that you need to build in your CV, in your portfolio? So a scholar map can help do that as well, where you're mapping out things of what you're currently doing and what you'd like to be doing in the near future. One thing I do want to mention before I go to the next slide is that these tools that I mentioned, you can find these online. Many places you can find them for free. I would encourage you to go to your own office. You may have an office of faculty, office for faculty development, faculty affairs, all of the above. Different institutions call it different things. They may already have career development tools already built for your institution specifically. You just may not know that it exists. And so step one would be go to your own school of medicine, school of dentistry, whatever school that you're part of. Go to your school's website to see what tools do they already have for you. If you don't find anything, then definitely take a look at these tools that I've mentioned here in the presentation. Next slide. And then these are just some steps. If you decided to make a scholar map, it really walks you through the steps of how to do that. So I wanted to include this in the presentation if this is something that people gravitate to, that you want to take it step by step to build a scholar map for yourself. Next slide. So the last objective here is how to make a citizenship yes useful for your career advancement. So I'll dig into what that is. And then as we go through these last few slides, please start putting questions in the Q&A portion after we finish these last few slides. We're going to use the rest of the time to answer your questions related to any of the information that we've discussed. So I just wanted to just mention that so you can start putting questions in the Q&A portion of the presentation. Next slide, please. So some questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about the citizenship yes, or joining, being part of a collaborative or a group, or doing something like that is, can I get a paper out of this? Can I get some scholarship out of this? And then number two, as we've mentioned, hopefully you've seen a theme here today that we've mentioned, is can I see it on the path to advance my career? That's really the big question that we hope that you're gravitating to during this talk today. Next slide. So what happens with collaboration? Some of you, you might feel comfortable on your island of productivity. I'm not sure how productive that will be as you progress in your career. And maybe you've done group work before and it hasn't gone well. Maybe you've tried collaborating with colleagues on a paper. Maybe that paper, it's been 3 years and the paper still hasn't been sent to even be under review yet. So maybe you've tried it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about this again. Hear me out, hear us out about considering the citizenship yes again. So here are some things that happen with collaboration, which maybe you've had happen, maybe you haven't, is time. You're feeling as though your time is wasted. You show up to meetings, people don't have an agenda, or people haven't done their part of what they said they were going to do. You're supposed to write the introduction. You still haven't written it. You said you were going to do this. You were going to email so-and-so. You haven't done it yet. Or people just not showing up to meetings is another thing that could happen and make things really difficult to collaborate. The other thing here in the middle is not utilizing the expertise of your team members, especially if you're a team member that maybe is not as vocal to share. Actually, yes, I have expertise in XYZ. I can take that on. I can write about that. And so not utilizing your expertise can end up meaning you have a smaller team or no team at all when collaborators start to pull back from wanting to work with you. And then the other piece here that can be really, really difficult is the inequities of in the distribution of work. Who's ever done a group project where there's 6 of you, but really only 2 of you actually wrote the presentation or wrote the paper? Or, you know, people who show up the day of a group presentation and says, I'm ready to present. And you're like, you haven't been here for 3 months helping us with this. So why are you here? So maybe that's happened to you and that maybe has left a bad taste in your mouth of wanting to collaborate. So we recognize this, the literature recognizes that this can definitely happen. So we want to go through things to hopefully protect you from these things, or at least minimize it from happening. There's also humanness that unfortunately happens with this, but we want to go through some tips and tools to help you all be successful if you decide to collaborate in the near future. So next slide. All right, so there are some team science models out there that we want to briefly go through with you to think about. One of them is called the sprint model. If you've heard of the sprint model, kudos to you if you have. If you haven't, now you can say that you have heard of it. This was actually invented by Google Ventures to help people essentially be productive when working in groups. Group work, as you know, can be time intensive, trying to manage the work styles and personalities of different people. So they wanted to put something together to help people be productive in a short amount of time, maximizing your group's expertise. And so the sprint model, they adapted that for writing academic papers. And so what they focused on was the analysis of secondary data. I think you could definitely use the sprint model for different types of papers. If you're writing a narrative review, a scoping review, doing an empirical research project, you could potentially adapt the sprint model to this. What this model does, it helps people have highly focused, guided research meetings when you do meet, where things aren't feeling nebulous or out of place. It's very, very targeted meetings with a goal in mind every time that you meet. So next slide. So this is probably teeny tiny on the screen, but what essentially this is, it walks you through essentially a meeting of what they did to work on a piece of a paper that the group was working on. So the first 10 minutes, they focused on setting the stage of what is our goal today? What are we hoping to do during this meeting today? Their goal was to write the abstract together. And so they spent about 40 minutes writing the abstract of their project. They split into 2 teams. They had someone who was writing the intro section, someone else, some other 2 people who were writing the method section. So very granular with how you do this. And then they go here retrieving the analysis plan. They spent 20 minutes doing that. And then determining next steps, they spent about 10 minutes doing that. So it's really carving this out step by step, how much time you're going to spend to really utilize your time well. So I really like this approach. I have different writing groups that I'm a part of. We use a very kind of a variation of this where we actually do writing of a particular research project during our meetings. It's very targeted, and I find this can be really successful. And so this is an example of, if you decide to do something like this, being as specific as possible can really help you. Next slide. Some questions to ask yourselves too as you're thinking about, do I want to do a writing team? I hope all of you will be part of a writing team. If you're not part of one now, I really hope you consider doing that, especially if it's hard for you to find writers within your institution or within your department. You can find people in other departments of your institution or even outside of your institution to essentially write. But these are some questions to ask yourself or ask your potential team. What need is your group addressing? What interest? Hopefully your interests align if you decide to write together. Who do you need on the team? Does it need to be all family medicine folks? Do you need other disciplines? Do you need a pediatrics person? Do you need a psychologist? Do you need a pharmacist on the team? You know, are you writing for interprofessional education? Probably good to have other disciplines besides medicine on the team. So things to think about. The project timeline, roles and responsibilities, establishing rules on how the team will make decisions. And the biggest thing at the very bottom is discussion of authorship. Early and often is what's recommended in the literature. So there's no questions, there's no guesses. There's the discussion of, okay, well, when are you going up for promotion? I'm going up in a year. Okay, when is this person going up? 3 years, great. Maybe that person who's going up sooner, maybe should be lead author to really help strengthen their promotion package. These are questions that you could talk about as a writing team to help you be successful. So nothing is kind of left in the dark. Next slide. This is just a visual of things to think about when building a successful writing team. This Brown and colleagues really recommends having someone who's maybe the team lead or a project manager type person who can like schedules, can get things organized, who can keep people on the agenda and the timelines to get projects done. I always say to my colleagues, and you might have heard this saying too, is a good paper is a done paper. It's completed, it's in publication, it's in press, it's done. And so that's the goal, is to get the good work you all are doing on paper, in press, for publication, to share it with the masses or share it at a conference. Sitting on a paper for 3 years won't get that done. So this really just goes through the steps for you all to think about if you decide to utilize writing groups, how to be successful with the writing group that you are working with. Next slide. So this is just a brief summary of what Dr. Campbell and I have discussed so far. Before you say yes or no, look at your career map. How will this support your career development? Will it support your career development? And then setting boundaries for yourself. You could take a lot on your plate, but your plate, as Dr. Campbell mentioned earlier, the plate doesn't change. It's the same size. And so how do you work with that? How do you get things off that don't need to be there, add things that maybe do need to be there, maybe realize that that thing is only interim and only be there for a little bit. So yeah, I can add that extra thing because it's time limited, so to speak. And so thinking about your boundaries. And so how impenetrable or porous do they need to be? Depending on where you are in your career, what you're trying to do, that may change. It should change from time to time. And then my hope is that you all will find an effective team. Scholarship can be very, very hard to do by yourself. And so I find when I work with others, it's much more enjoyable, especially when you find the right group to work with, and you can be much more effective with what you're doing and what you're putting out there for the masses to read. So with that, next slide. Those are just a few resources for you all. If this topic is of interest and you want to take a deep dive, any of these books really go into a deep dive for you. So we wanted to share those resources for you all. And then this next slide, this is where we wanted to take some time to, essentially we have about 20 minutes left to really engage in a conversation with you all, answering your questions about this topic, about just navigating the realm of academic medicine, period. We do have a QR code, as they mentioned. Myself, Dr. Campbell, are part of the Leadership Through Scholarship Fellowship through STFM, along with our colleagues who aren't here, Dr. Judy Washington and Dr. Jose Rodriguez, whom we miss dearly. But this QR code takes you to our Leadership Through Scholarship Fellowship website, if that is something of interest to you or someone you know who is not here. And then I believe our STFM colleagues will post it in the chat for you as well. But I'll hand the mic back over to STFM to navigate the Q&A portion.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much to Drs. Obaid and Campbell for being with us today. We continue to encourage folks to put your questions in the Q&A, and I will definitely get to them. I have a few to start us off today. So these first couple actually focus on early career faculty specifically. So this first question, attending to like the inherent power imbalance hierarchy that is medicine, academic medicine. So when we talk about, you know, how to say yes, and Dr. Campbell, you talked about those four aspects: time-bound, resource-linked, interim, entitled. So it sounds like a lot of negotiation might go into saying yes. And so how do early career faculty, I guess, approach this negotiation with yes, in what feels, for lack of a better phrase, maybe safe and successful? So how to navigate that, yes, as early career, and either of you, both of you, feel free to share.
Sure. So the interesting thing about early career faculty is that they're early career faculty. So they, we don't know where the bathroom is. There's just so much we don't know. We don't know who we are. And many times we don't have any clue about a career trajectory. We don't even know if we're supposed to have a trajectory. We don't even know what that is. So whenever an early career faculty member wants to negotiate around these things, one of the first things that faculty member has to do is recognize their position as an early career faculty member. And what that means is there's going to be some give and take with the organization. There's going to be some discussion about these areas that aren't 1 hour discussions. I mean, these may be discussions over a few weeks. And the key thing that an early career faculty member has to do is whenever that person's chair or department head or lead requests more responsibilities, you can always say, let me take some time and think about this, and then consult some folks, talk to some other colleagues, talk to some mentors, and really figure out how to address these four areas in a different setting or apart from the constraints of sitting before the chair or the other leader.
Thank you.
I second everything he said.
Okay. All right. So I have a few that have come in through Q&A. So I'll start with the first one. How do you respond to a supervisor who says they want you to do something because they know it will help you grow, but you think it's just busy work and will not advance your education or career? What if they still want you to do it even though you said no?
Yeah. So I'll start with that. So because we are in medicine and because we are scientists, one of the first things that you want to see are the data. And it's nothing wrong to ask for the data. And what I mean by that is, I remember many years ago having the discussion with a senior leader, and a senior leader told me that tenure wasn't important, and I shouldn't be thinking about that at all. And so I decided to go to the literature, and I went to the literature and I looked particularly around groups who were minoritized or underrepresented in medicine. And what I found didn't quite align with what I was told. So presenting the data will always help you.
Just giving a pause, Dr. Obai. Any
No, I absolutely agree with that, with the data piece. The other piece that I might throw in to that is the pause and let me get back to you response to your supervisor, to give yourself time to, one, go to the data, to look that up, and then two, to also go to your, career map or whatever you decide to use to see, does this align with what I want to do? Could this be something that I go back and ask, okay, I notice I don't have this and this and this on my CV. Maybe I could do this, but is it time limited? Could I do this to see if I like it? So I agreed to it for 12 months. And then after that, I get to decide if I want to stay and do this task or not. So sometimes it's, can I get back to you for you to go back and do that work on your own? Look at the literature, look at, well, maybe this could be helpful for me once I had a night or two to sleep on it and look at that. So that's the other thing that I would add is to let me get back to your response and really do your work to find out, could this be helpful? Because maybe it could. Maybe you talk to a mentor and find out, well, yeah, maybe you should think about this, but do it for a little bit of time. Don't sign up for it indefinitely.
Mhm. Thank you. Along similar lines, this question, I am hearing it in relation to the when yes means no portion of the presentation today. So first of all, love the cake analogy, Dr. Campbell. I love cake too. So when both of you talk about your career trajectory, and again, thinking from that early career perspective, how the overall question, how do you get clear on the trajectory? And then little offshoots from that question, like maybe the people and places when you think about your own journey, the people and places that have been important for you in getting clear on your trajectory. So that's the question. How do you get clear who were the important people, places?
So the first thing I would say is, you know, I didn't know to say no.
Mm,
And the reason I didn't know to say no, early in my career in some of these situations is because I didn't know I was making a cake. I didn't know what I was making. So many times we just don't know. So part of what helps us in these situations, so we mentioned the literature, and that's one of the things that we've been working to do is to populate the literature with information to help you guys to know um, to figure out some of those things, like what is isolation in academic medicine? What does it mean to be isolated? And then you can take that paper to your chair and say, hey, look, the literature talks about isolation as a problem for these groups. How are you going to help me not be isolated? And then there are programs. I mean, so there's mentorship, there's peer mentorship, there's instrumental mentorship. There are programs like STFM runs that can be helpful in terms of figuring out who you are. And then there are also society-based things, that can be helpful to figure out who you are. But to start, many times you won't know, and it'll be a key mentor. For me in particular, and I'll never forget this, there was a department chair who was not a family medicine department chair who said to me, you could have this, or you could do this. And it had never crossed my mind that I could do that. But what preceded him saying that was work product, meaning I produced something. I was trying to just produce something, and I didn't know. I mean, I was just trying to do something, and he recognized the potential in me. So you should be in environments where people can see your talent, see your ability, see your potential, and feed into that. And that will help you figure out your career trajectory of who it is you're trying to be in academic medicine.
Yeah, I love that. My own experience was very similar, where it was a mentor who saw, I guess you can call them blind spots, but areas that I didn't even realize were a thing for me to do. especially for someone like me. I'm not only underrepresented in medicine, but I'm also underrepresented in my discipline. I'm a psychologist, and there's not many of us in schools of medicine. So it's that double, we put a paper out recently, we called it a double disparity, that those of us who are not physicians are navigating in health science centers. And so it was a mentor who brought those things to my attention, that you could do this, you could think about that. You have an interest in XYZ. And so I definitely second what Dr. Campbell is saying about finding people who see the things in you that you don't see, is invaluable. It was an invaluable experience, and still is an invaluable experience for me now.
That is so powerful, what you both said. I really also appreciate the fact that sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know that we're baking a cake. We don't know what questions to ask. And I'll just say and put a plug for me that it was so helpful to be part of the Leadership Through Scholarship Fellowship, because it was that participation that really opened my eyes to, hey, what do I need to be thinking about? What questions do I need to be asking? So, um, all right. So next question, what is the best way to reinforce expectations of contributions to scholarly projects when they are not being met, especially when it's a supervisor who is not contributing?
So that's
We've had this discussions come up a lot, Dr.
so
Campbell.
this
That's why I was waiting
is
for Dr. Campbell to answer this, actually.
I was actually
We've
going
had
to
yes,
this
give a
come
woo
up.
yes.
child on that one.
So the first point in that is be careful about asking a supervisor to be co-author with you on a project. Be careful, for a couple of reasons. One is they're busy, busy people, and they may not have the time to contribute. So that's number one. The second part is, once you have asked them, then you're kind of stuck to some degree, because you've asked them, and they you can try to give them an out, and we've done that before. But I can tell you, we've had projects that have lingered for several months because we couldn't get a senior leader to make their contribution, and we finally said, do you really have time for this? Do you really want to be involved with this? It's okay. We want to give you the permission to bow out of this. But what you really want to do is you want to take care of that issue up front. And what we tell the fellows in thinking about this, before you ask someone to write with you, you want to know if they've written before. So if you look them up and they haven't published a lot, they haven't been writing a lot, that may be a sign to you that you may not want to ask them. If you look them up and you can't find an H index, you can't find, which is how well read they are, you can't find articles that they published. If the last one as the leader that they published was 10 years ago, maybe you acknowledge them or get their advice and you don't ask them to be an author. But once you've asked them, then you got to walk that out. You really have to walk that out.
All right, so we're nearing the end of time, so I want to get in one more question. And this one is really great considering the conversations about well-being and burnout. What's your advice to keep work-life balance and financial goals in the context of today's discussion while accepting new responsibilities and adding new roles?
So I would go back to the pie chart that Dr. Obaid put up, which I think speaks to that so very, very much. That 50% that you love to do has to contribute to your wellness. And what I mean by that is, so Dr. Rodriguez and I, and one of the well-being folks at his institution, we put an article together called Writing for Wellness. I mean, because a lot of people think writing, oh my God, I'm writing an article. But there are things that you can do within that 50% that help promote your wellness and also help you in the sense of just maintaining some sanity and clarity and help you drown out, if you will, for lack of a better word, that smaller percentage of things that you have to do that you don't like to do. But I'll tell you, you have to make time for you, and you have to figure out within your career trajectory to build in time. And we tell the fellows, if you have a big project at work, you need to tell your significant other. Y'all need to sit down together and y'all need to plan. Okay, so this big paper, this big grant we're going to submit. Well, I'm going to need help with the laundry or help with this on these nights, or we're going to delay this trip until March. So those are things that will help promote your wellness, certainly involving those that are close to you in your day-to-day situations and work roles.
Yeah, I definitely second that. I think short answer is, again, maximizing your A's and minimizing your C, I think can really help with what you're talking about, where you can get bills paid, get the mortgage under control, whatever that is, but also find joy and flourish in the environments that you are working in. So yeah, I second that.
Well, thank you so much. I am always the person that wants to give people their flowers. So I want to read this message of gratitude that came in the Q&A. So the person said, "Thanks for this excellent presentation. I am not an early career person, have been around for a while and perhaps a late bloomer. A negative incident turned me off the whole promotional pathway, but now I see the advancement of my field and findings as larger than myself, and hence am trying to be more mindful of applying for an advancement. Saying more yes for sure. Thank you for your work and this talk full of resources." So thank you again to Drs. Obaid and Campbell. Thank you all for joining us. I also need to put a plug in for the MMHC, the Minority and Multicultural Health Collaborative. Please, if you're not already a member, feel free to join us. We would love to meet you and have you be a part of our collaborative. So take care, everyone. 3 minutes to spare.